Excellent. So we have just watched 2.0 Lucy, and we are very fortunate to have Fenella, the director, and Steve, the composer. How is it to be back in sunny Romford?
My most favourite place in the world since it was in the Sci-Fi Festival as well.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much for bringing it to us. So can you tell us a little bit more about the background, where the story came from, etc.?
I think I've always been interested in ancient hominin species as opposed to dinosaurs, because we coexisted with them for a very long time, and there are many species that we still haven't discovered. So I just really love the idea that they were clearly able to, a lot of the drawings that they found that Neanderthals had made, that they could draw, they had fire, they could clearly speak, love, have emotions. So I've always, quite a number of years I've been really interested in that idea that they're not kind of these primitive, the kind of iconic primitive Neanderthal with a club. I think they were probably, very emotional, quite intelligent, fellow human hominin.
And this, am I right in thinking this was your first feature film?
Yeah.
And how was the transition from the short to the feature film go?
It's huge because, first of all, the script went through many different sort of drafts, and it's just, there's no comparison, because a 10-minute short, it's one sort of plot beat really, maybe with one or two twists, but with the feature it's sort of this endless machine of, you've got to keep it interesting, you've got to keep the plot twisting, and then of course making it is just huge in comparison, because even if, I think when I've made a couple of shorts and the shoots were sort of 2 or 3 days, this was 12 days, but it was relentless, and then the actual editing was just huge in comparison, huge, because it was 135 scenes, and that, it's just taking tiny little scenes that take a long time to edit, and it was just, it's a very different thing making a feature. It's huge.
So Stephen, when did you come into the process?
You'd mostly assembled the film, and it was still a bit changeable at times, particularly towards the end. But I did a test track just to sort of create a sound world before I'd really even seen much of the film, based on what Fenella had told me. I'd seen a few rushes. And then he was really trying to find a sound world that was, because there's mostly dialogue, you had to, you couldn't be too obtrusive with the music, and I was looking for, I'd used two sort of sounds. I used the electronic world, which you can obviously hear, but I also used strings, soltasto, at very low volume, and so you could hear all the harmonics, and they create quite a weird sound world, even though it's a very traditional orchestral sound at times. It gives it a very eerie feel and an otherworldly feel.
I thought it was really interesting because obviously when we first start watching films for the festival, we start looking at the trailers and things like that. And I appreciate that with the wonder of visual effects and etc., you can change everything. But what I found really interesting is I watched the trailer and I thought, well, this is interesting. I wonder where they shot that. And then, of course, I looked into it further, and it's in Wales, but it's not. Do you know what I mean? I think you've done a really good job of.
Well, it's not, so because I had, like, the budget is uber micro budget, so it was actually shot in some sheds in a field in West Sussex, but I spent some time trying to find the epic, dystopian future burnt out England. And the Paris Mountain in Anglesey used to be a Roman mine, and that's why it's got that lovely copper colour, but the problem was I couldn't afford to take everyone to Paris Mountain. So while we were shooting in the sheds in a field, we had on FaceTime the drone operator in Paris Mountain with the DP that I was using, so that we were kind of directing it on FaceTime because we just couldn't afford to go up there. So it's located in Paris Mountain, but the sheds were actually in West Sussex, although the the lovely, beautiful Copper Mountain is Anglesey in Wales, and I always wanted it to be set somewhere like that, you know, somewhere just burnt out and futuristic. It was very micro budget, this film, as you can probably tell.
Listen, everyone comes from somewhere, and I actually think that considering your budget, it looks fantastically polished. It looks, you know, am I right? Yeah. There you go, see, thank you. So, obviously, this is the second time you've been with us in Romford.
Yeah.
So what's changed over the last sort of 6 or 7 months? What are you working on now, both of you?
I'm working on library music. I just did a trail for the E channel through Fenella as well. That was broadcasting France and Europe and Africa. So yeah, still things going on there.
Well, I'm writing another script and trying not to have any VFX in this one, because it will also be, you know, trying to make it much less ambitious in terms of making it sort of feel a bit more real, and so that when you're making a low budget film, what I realised is it's important to have ambition kind of emotionally, but once you start getting into special effects and things, and you know, ancient hominid species and things, you need a budget really. So I'm trying to write a script that feels a bit more real, which I'd like to make this year.
It's definitely the thinking woman's kind of script, and definitely something that's very different, which is why obviously we've asked you to come back and show the film again. What can you tell us anything about your current project? I mean, anything kind of...
So I think Lucy is about the environment really, and how we've messed it up, and if only it hadn't been our species that had survived. But the current one is it's really about grief and how we deal with that, and the way that grief turns you mad and makes you do crazy things that you wouldn't normally do. That's it in a nutshell. It's much more real than kind of in the present. So,
have we got any questions out here in the audience?
How did you choose the aesthetics of the woman? Like, where did you do any research? Where did it come from? Why does she look like she does?
Why does she look like she does? Because I had this idea that because I'd seen, you know, apparently Neanderthals were olive-skinned and had red hair. So I knew that I wanted her to have this red hair, and I'd seen these amazing wigs on models on Pinterest, and I loved the idea that she would have her hair, but it would all be like designed and with beads and things like that. And then with the costume, I just had a friend who was doing all the costumes as a big favour, because that's how it works. And I was very clear about the colours, the colour palette of them all. So Lucy's always in red, Michael's always in blue, so their colours will contrast. And then Dante and Alyssa, they had kind of different colours, and they were in a kind of dissonant contrast. So I just said to my friend, look, I need her to be in this colour palette, and she and another friend of hers made the costume. I mean, the thing is that we didn't want her to be sort of dressed in fur skins. It's very tough because we had no budget, and in the end I just said, look, this is the colour scheme, I don't want it to be fur skins, so that's what they came up with. This collar was beautifully made.
So what was your most challenging day on set?
Do you know, I sort of felt blessed. I'm not religious in any way, but it was pouring with rain. We were in, somebody had lent us their field, which had these really skanky derelict sheds that hadn't been in there, nobody had been in them for years and years. And it's supposed to be 40 degrees, and it was pouring with rain pretty much the whole time, until the 2 days that we were supposed to be outside. And suddenly that turned into the hottest days on record.
Wow.
And so that's that was supposed to be, that was amazing because we were really freaking out because we knew we had these 2 days and we slipped them around a bit, but we knew when they got outside it had to look really, really boiling hot, and it did. So it could have been challenging, but in the end somebody was looking down on me making it work. Look, the challenge when you're on that relentless, I think you've just got to be really well organised because they weren't massively long days, but they were long days. Also, it's a very wordy script. It could probably be less wordy, but you know, it was a wordy script. So the actors were having to learn, and also you can only do 2 or 3 takes maximum when you're on that kind of budget and schedule. So the actors came on absolutely word perfect, and they knew it was like, well, 2, 3 takes max. In fact, most of them were 2 takes. And I was absolutely horrified when I was editing it that the shot where Michael is asleep and then the egg starts going crick, crick. I'd only done 1 take on that. I thought that I was really obviously not thinking about the edit when I was doing that. But yeah, I think that's the challenge, is that you've got to get, the actors have got to deliver it on the first perform, you know, the first take, and if not the first, the second, because you just do not have time. And I was lucky that the actors all knew that they were word perfect and they'd learnt their lines, and they were all living in a house round the corner, so they were rehearsing it all the time, although it was shot out of order. I think one of the challenges was that Michael's hair grew when he was going from the studio into the kitchen and back. There were 10 days between them, and his hair had grown a little bit between the, you know, you're running into the kitchen to get the knife, and I'd be looking to go, oh my God, his hair looks quite short, you know? But yeah, any challenge, yeah, the challenge is, you know, hardly any takes on low budget, really.
I really like the language you created, so I was wondering how you came up with a brand new language. Was it inspired by some actual language, and what was the origin story of the new language?
Yeah, I mean, that language isn't really created, because somebody who was sort of helping me with that said, you've got to create a language and it's got to have a grammatical structure, and I just thought, well, I can't do that. I mean, I don't even know where to start with that. But I did know that, because I'd heard that in the African Cajun language groups, the clicks are, you know, were used in sort of prehistory, because they would click when hunting, and so that was the thing. I thought, well, any pre-human hominin species, I'm guessing, have that click as well, because they would have all been, I'm guessing, who knows, hunter-gatherers. So that was, I was very clear that we'd have those clicks. Lois learnt, I wrote the words down and she learnt them, but then there was a bit at the end where there wasn't enough, and I said, can you just like make some up? And like on the 1 take, and she just launched into this beauty. It's where it says, you know, when there's the shot of Paris Mountain, and she's saying, you know, where would you be, Homo sapien? And she just was riffing on fantastic sounding ancient hominin species language, but she did learn, I did sort of make some up, and she did learn it, but it didn't have a grammatical structure or any shape, which, you know, a big budget film, they would have invented a language that made sense, apparently, is what they do.
Well, listen, thank you ever so much again. As you heard, our audience really enjoyed your film, and yeah, we hope to see you again in the very near future with your next work. If you can give them a round of applause, please. Thank you ever so much.